Longford, and that's the news at just after 10:30.
Now here on BBC News 24, it's time for Hard Talk.
A series of riots in northern England have brought race relations to breaking point in some areas. What's to be done? The far-right parties in Britain want an immediate ban on non-white immigration and encouragement for non-whites to return to their country of ethnic origin. Today I'm talking to the head of the British National Party, which advocates those policies. Why are they so intolerant? Nick Griffin, welcome to the programme.
Hello.
Louis Farrakhan, the controversial leader of the Nation of Islam, is coming to Britain. You're glad about that, aren't you?
I wouldn't say I'm glad about it, but I'd say he's got a right to come here. I think trying to keep him out was going to inflame tensions. If he comes here, people have to listen to what he's got to say, and at the end of it, he goes away again.
A man who's expressed anti-Semitic, deeply offensive to some people, anti-Semitic comments in the past.
It's like some of his comments have been deeply offensive to many people in this country, offensive to Jews, offensive to white people. But still, he's only talking about things. If he's here inciting violence or attacking people, he should be thrown out. But if he's here to talk and debate, there's no harm in people listening.
You care whether he's offensive to Jews? I mean, some of your positions are pretty offensive to Jews.
I don't think they are, but...
what, the denial of the Holocaust, for instance?
I don't deny the Holocaust.
You don't? What do you deny, then?
I deny that it's right. There's something that happened 60 years ago, which my father fought against, and many people in this country fought against, is used as a club with which to beat people. So that if you say, well, we think the multiracial society isn't working, oh, well, you're a Nazi, you want to gas people.
So you've changed your views about it, because your magazines have consistently called it a hollow hoax.
I've used the phrase once. It's not just people like the British National Party who've said that it's wrong that this should be used in modern politics.
No, but you've changed your view here, haven't you?
A lot of people have changed their views on this, yes.
So you now accept that the Holocaust took place?
I've never denied that there was a Holocaust, that large numbers of Jews perished just because they were Jews. There's no doubt about that.
You've said it was a conspiracy, a mixture of wartime Allied propaganda and all sorts of
nonsense. There's a lot of propaganda in anything connected with war. The facts and fictions of the Second World War and the Holocaust are very confused. They're now being studied mainly by Jews, people like Norman Finkelstein.
Nobody's confused about the fact that 6 million Jews died. Countries all over the world have accepted it. There's a few dissidents on the side, and David Irving, who your party in the past has also supported, has been comprehensively rubbish, hasn't it?
No, there's Jewish academics like Norman Finkelstein, who...
You can always find a few dissident academics.
He's recently published a book called The Holocaust Industry. Now, he's not denying, just as I'm not denying, that large numbers of Jews suffered and were murdered just because they were Jews.
6 million Jews in the gas chambers. You accept that now, do you?
There's no question that there was large numbers. I don't think anyone accepts 6 million. It's described in the Holocaust Museum in Yad Vashem as being symbolic.
So you've given up your support for David Irving as well, the historian?
I don't support David Irving. I think
but your party hosted evenings for him, and party leaders have attended his seminars. In '92, your party hosted an evening for him.
That was before I was even in the British National Party.
It's still your party.
Yes, well, we...
so I'm putting this to you that your views have changed substantially, then. The views of the party have changed substantially.
I would say that there's certainly been a reassessment of it, and looking at it, this is now something in the last century, which my father was in the RAF fighting against the Nazis.
What's that got to do with the Holocaust?
I would say that for people in the BBC to come and use this as a 60-year-old stick to beat me when we should be talking about...
Why were you using it as a stick? I'm merely trying to elicit what your views are on this.
Yes.
You're very defensive about it.
Yeah, but I feel that it's wrong. And
which bit is wrong?
I'm defensive about it because...
Which bit is wrong, Mr. Griffin?
It's wrong that this issue, which is a matter for historians now, and is the last century...
And courts, as happened with David Irving. Courts which decided that
it is wrong that this issue is used as a moral club to stop sensible debate about what is happening in our country.
But it's people in the far right who brought it up, who've been questioning it. You can't say then it's wrong for people to combat it.
I haven't been questioning it. I haven't been questioning
it.
Well,
you talked about the hollow hoax
for many years. Just as Norman Finkelstein, a Jewish academic, says there's a Holocaust industry. There is a racket of people who make money out of being Jewish. Not Jews, ordinary Jews, like the incident in Switzerland, where the Swiss paid Swiss banks and insurance companies, paid huge sums of money over because they hadn't given money to Jewish survivors.
You were found guilty.
None of that money has gone to ordinary Jews.
Mr. Griffin.
It's all in the hands of Zionist organisations.
Mr. Griffin,
That
Mr.
is a
Griffin,
racket.
you were convicted in 1998 of distributing material likely to incite racial
Indeed.
hatred, and you were given a 9-month suspended sentence. You said you were convicted under a law in which telling the truth was no defence.
That's what the law says, yes.
Well, that's not strictly true. I mean, what the jury had to decide here was whether your magazine contained material that was abusive or insulting. And they, decided that it did.
Yes, but the judge had to tell them under the law that the fact everything I was saying was true was no defence, and I think that's a bad law.
The question that the jury was asked to consider was, did you intend the magazine to stir up racial hatred? Even you conceded it was possible, at your trial, you conceded it was possible that people of non-white race might be insulted.
Yes,
you did concede that,
I did concede that, and I also said that...
So you can see why the jury came to the conclusion they did, then?
The reason the jury came to the conclusion they did was a multiracial biased jury.
Why? Because it was multiracial, it was biased?
Against a member of the British National Party, yes. They would have convicted a pig wearing a BNP rosette.
Hardly, they convicted you, didn't they?
They did indeed.
Are you a pig wearing a rosette?
Maybe, but they would have convicted me had I been talking about block drains, because it was put to them, this is the British National Party, these are bad people, they're politically incorrect.
So it was a biased jury and you didn't get justice?
I got justice in that the judge, once the jury had made a decision to convict me, the judge acknowledged that he believed that I hadn't intended to incite racial hatred, that I was acting under good intentions.
He left it up to the jury. He said what the
no,
jury
in,
had
in,
to
in his
decide
summing
was...
up, yes, but in his summing up afterwards, no, sorry, not the summing up, in his sentencing, he said that the jury convicted me. He said that he thought that I'd strayed across the line which the law makes inadvertently, that I was acting with good intentions, and because I was acting with good intentions, he suspended the sentence, the minimum possible sentence.
Are you acting with good intentions when it comes to the riots in Northern England, and your answer is racial discrimination?
I'm acting in good intentions in regards to the riot in Northern England when me and the British National Party stand up and give a voice to ordinary white people who nobody else listens to.
Your answer is to halt all further non-white immigration.
Indeed.
That's not an answer.
It's a start. When
these are British people who were fighting on the streets.
Yes, many of them. Yes.
They are British people. They have an equal right as you to be on the streets.
Yes.
Equal right to be here.
Yes.
Why do you want to encourage non-white immigrants to return to their lands of ethnic origin? By saying non-white, you're discriminating against them, aren't you?
Well, for one
on
reason,
the grounds of colour.
On the grounds of colour,
which is pretty unacceptable these days, isn't it?
If you go to Oldham and Burnley and Bradford and parts of London, where our country has been totally changed without any democratic voice in it for ordinary people, then you'll find that it's just possible.
What do you mean without a democratic voice? People in this country vote overwhelmingly for parties that want racial harmony in this country.
The mass media, particularly the BBC, sets the political agenda so that when it comes to an election, people have a choice effectively between Tory and Labour.
It doesn't tell people what to vote for, does it?
No,
Mr.
it doesn't,
Griffin?
but it sets the agenda whereby people think, well, what's acceptable to debate, or what are we debating this time around? So all the main parties at the last election agreed with the Commission for Racial Equality. They wouldn't even raise the issue of race. So that is not...
Are you complaining about the
democracy.
fact that the total number of votes received by right-wing parties in this country wouldn't even fill a big football stadium?
No, indeed. Indeed, I'm not.
So your views are, you know, so far to the minority in this country.
No, in terms
considered so offensive by so many.
No,
and yet you're blaming the media
look at the
for
opinion
a fact.
polls. Look at the opinion polls, one moment.
More people don't vote for you.
Opinion polls on race relations.
Whose opinion polls?
Opinion polls run by for instance.
Sorry, run by who?
Yeah, run by. There's not been one national opinion poll.
Whose opinion polls are we talking about?
I was saying. I'll explain in a second. There's not been one national opinion poll run on the issue of asylum seekers, but many local newspapers all around the country where asylum seekers have been coming have run opinion polls. 97% in those opinion polls, local newspapers, things like the Manchester Evening News and so on, 97% of the respondents have said they don't want any more asylum seekers. So that's one side of the population.
Why don't you deal with the situation here? Why don't you attempt to mediate, improve relations, help with unemployment in these particular areas? Why do you just say the answer is to ship out black people?
We don't say that.
You do?
No, we say the
Your party manifesto talks about
fact.
encouragement of non-white immigrants to return to their lands of ethnic origin.
Yes, if they want to go.
Yes,
that's not shipping them out. That's
that was in the past.
No,
that was in the past, wasn't it?
Before I took over the party, we changed.
So
yes,
another change in the
yes,
party, trying to make yourself more electorally acceptable?
perhaps in the same way that Tony Blair changed the Labour Party, or various Tory leaders are saying the Tory Party must change. All democratic parties change and evolve.
So why don't you help mediate instead of contributing to prejudice?
We're not contributing to prejudice. The prejudice and the fear and the concern amongst the white population is that they see themselves visibly becoming a minority in their own country and no one addressing that fact.
The police say your presence was a deliberate ploy to exploit a racial situation that struck a chord of fear among our communities and not just Asian. That's Oldham's Divisional Police Commander, Mr. Eric Hewitt.
Yes, because he has made a terrible hash of policing Oldham. He's allowed...
So everybody's made a mistake who has a contrary view to yours.
No, not at all. But Mr. Hewitt...
He's in a position to know this. He's talking about what he knows. He knows
for 10
the area.
years,
He talks to the people
I know the
in
area too.
and
I talk to more people than he does in that area.
How do you know?
Because I do.
How do you know? How do you know? How can you possibly make a statement like that, Mr. Griffin?
Who've had guns pointed out by Asians. Hewitt has come down and threatened to arrest them. And I've actually sat down and talked in their front room.
There's been violence on both sides.
There has
huge
indeed.
under-reporting from the Asian community
and also
of the
from the
violence directed at them.
No, that goes both ways. The white people have no faith in the police either. And Hewitt's police force have made a mess of policing Oldham. Hewitt sat by for 10 years while a minority of Muslim thugs attacked white people, and Hewitt and his police force did nothing to stop it. That's what's created the hatred in Oldham.
What about the unemployment in the areas? You always say that the white areas are receiving less. That's not true, actually. The latest regeneration budget of 30 million is going to two areas.
Just announced.
Two areas, yes, which have a split of 50-50, white and Asian.
Yes. But for the last 10 years, it's been massively disproportionately put into the Asian areas. There's no doubt that unemployment makes things worse. And
in Oldham, four wards are in the bottom 1% of the most deprived areas in the country. 3 out of 4 of those are predominantly Asian.
Yes.
They don't deserve the money?
They deserve the money.
If they're in poor straits like that?
If they're in 7%, if they're 9% of the population in Oldham, they deserve 9% of the money. Not a penny more, not a penny less. They've had a lot more in recent years. But I agree with you that unemployment and poverty does make these things worse. That was the folly of creating an unstable, multiracial society in a small,
why do you create
poor
an
country.
Unstable racial community? It's not a poor country at all. Why do you? Well, it's not a poor country. The richest countries in the world.
For the rich and the middle classes in this country, things are going swimmingly. The working class in this country are being screwed by globalisation. And the Labour Party has now joined the Tory Party on that, and ordinary people on ordinary estates suffer real poverty. Tell me this,
Mr. Griffin.
Live below the poverty line.
Tell me this, Mr. Griffin. Why don't you stand to live with black people in this country?
We can stand to live with black people, but
why are you recommending that they leave then?
Because if the present trend
that's not standing
in
to live
60
with
years'
them,
time, the British people will be a minority in their own homeland, and that's immoral. All peoples have a right to a homeland in which they're the majority, which is governed according to their rules. That's all we want.
Why does
we
it
haven't
make
got any
you
problem with the black people who are here.
No, why does it make you insecure, whatever the racial mix is in this country? Why does it make you feel insecure?
Because
mixes in this country. Why does it make you feel insecure?
Because when I look at other multiracial countries, throughout history, I see blood and horror and
why does it make you insecure here?
Insecure? No, of course not.
If you sit next to a black person on a bus, do you mind that?
No. What is it about them?
What is it about them? Well, because you want them to leave. You're encouraging them to leave.
Because
you used to want to compel them to leave. Now you've changed. You say you want them to leave of their own free will. Why should they? They're British. They're as British as you are.
Let me put it another way.
Why should they?
Could
you answer the question that way?
In a moment. But why does the BBC insist that every single one in the whole world should have a right to come and live in our country?
Nobody. The BBC is not insisting.
Most definitely
the BBC is reporting the events as they see them.
The BBC is politically biased towards immigration.
Can you answer that question?
Answer the question.
The question I put to you: why does their presence make you feel so insecure about your own identity? Which is apparently what you want to preserve.
Yeah, yes, because on present trends, according to government figures, as discussed in the Times in September last year, the British people are going to be a minority in our own land.
These are British people,
insecure.
Mr. Griffin. These are British people.
No, they're not.
They are British people. They have British passports.
They have British passports.
So they're British people.
That doesn't make them part of our nation.
They have equal rights.
Let me put it another way.
They have equal rights in this country.
Yes, they have equal rights under the law. They have equal rights in this country. But just because they have British passports,
many born here.
They are not. Yes, and even if they're born here, then just as British people living in India for generations under the Raj. 5 generations of white people were born in India under the Raj, and in 1948 they came home because no one maintained the fiction that those people were Indian. That would have been demeaning to them and demeaning to the Indians. It's exactly the same here.
It is demeaning for you, and a lot of people would find this, to pretend that they don't have equal rights in this country and shouldn't be allowed to stay if they want to.
There's no question. Of course they can stay if they want to. All we're saying...
You haven't told me why they worry you so much.
Because...
Is your identity as a white British person, so under threat?
Yes, it is.
Why? Why?
Because...
What does it threaten in your life? Tell me what it threatens
It's
in
under
your
threat
life.
because in
on a daily basis, what does it threaten you with?
Nothing on a daily basis at the moment, but it is threatening the British people as a whole with the destruction of our culture and the loss of our identity.
It's not destruction of culture.
Yes, it is.
Why?
Children in schools these days are taught, instead of Christianity and British history, they're taught the history of various parts of the world and they're taught Islam.
Why shouldn't that be taught?
That is destroying
who are you
our
to say?
traditional
A
culture.
lot of people think it's adding to it. Why do you think it's destroying it?
Well, white parents in those schools
can do
don't.
what you
What
can
do
do
think
what you
Flight
want.
to London's all about? People are fleeing from this by the hundreds of thousands.
You can do what you want. You
No,
can do what you want
can't
in your
do
own
what you
home.
want. Oh, in your own home until you turn the television on. Yes.
Well, you don't have a television, as you told me before.
Yes, indeed. I couldn't stand the propaganda. But
what are you doing if not inciting, racial hatred?
people have got the choice not to watch me.
By propagating these views, you make it all right for people to say, get rid of them.
No, what views?
Yes, you do. You do. By saying they should be encouraged to leave the country.
So if
you
I'm
make
saying,
it all right for that,
well, in that case, what about the Labour Party, which is Anne Cryer, a Labour MP up in Keighley, saying that immigrants shouldn't be allowed in if they can't speak English, and Asians should be forced to learn English? So you could say that she's encouraging people to think there's something different about them. That's a Labour Party MP.
You come across as very insecure if your identity is threatened by the presence of black people.
I think that's extraordinarily racist. Let me put it another way. Supposing Pakistan had so many white people or Chinese people moving into it that the Pakistanis were becoming a minority in their own country, you wouldn't have a Pakistani leader and say to him, you're insecure. That would be perceived as outrageous racism.
Compare like with like. Compare like with like. You're not comparing like with like. I'm asking you why the presence of black people in this country makes you feel insecure and you feel you're losing your identity. On a day-to-day basis, you say you're not. And yet you're campaigning, and your whole party is campaigning
because small numbers are
to
not a
ask
problem.
as many black people as possible to leave this country.
Because as we've seen in Oldham and Bradford and places like that, the multiracial society has been a disaster. It hasn't led to everyone loving each other. It's led to people who 20, 30 years ago got along quite well, loathing each other. It's nothing to do with the British National Party or Islamic extremists. That is the nature of the multicultural beast. It's what always happens. And I think that's a shocking thing, to build into a country unnecessarily.
You wrote in The Room, Mail magazine 4 years ago, the electors of Millwall did not back a postmodernist rightist party, but what they perceived to be a strong, disciplined organisation with the ability to back up its slogan, defend rights for whites, with well-directed boots and fists. When the crunch comes, power is the product of force and will, not of rational debate. You wrote that, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
Stand by it? Why are we even bothering to have a conversation then, if you think the way to change things is to put the boot in?
Because I don't.
Power is all about violence.
That was written at a time under certain circumstances, when there was still a very, very militant and violent far left, quite determined to deny the British National Party its democratic rights.
So another change.
And that had to be resisted by force.
Another change.
Yeah, and that was regretable.
You don't mention a left-wing party. You mention defend rights for whites. You don't mention a left-wing party.
Yes, but it was in the context of the fact that our people were being beaten in their own homes, literally tortured in their own homes by the far left. This has now stopped. Those times are gone, and I'm glad they've stopped.
So you've moved away from violence.
Yes, we've moved away from violence and confrontation. The British National Party made mistakes in the past, there's no doubt about it, but we've changed.
Well, you've given up a lot, haven't you? You've changed on a lot of policies now, haven't you? You've dumped fanaticism, you've dumped racism, you've dumped violence.
Yeah. And I
you'll be helping old ladies across the road.
We most certainly do help old ladies across the road.
Black old ladies
and
as
help
well?
them get bollards and things like that. Yeah, I have had black people voting for me in Oldham, so most definitely.
Who is going to buy this? That really you've changed your views and you're new and you're caring and sharing, when, as the police say, that you're causing fear in the communities, not just Asians. Who's going to believe any of this?
Well, I would say it's the police causing fear in places like that, creating mythical BNP marches when they know the BNP doesn't march. The police have got a political agenda all of their own there, the top policeman. Who's going to buy it? 16% of people in Oldham West bought it.
Who's going to buy it when you still have supporters of violence among your members? Tony Lacombe, is he still Director of Group Development?
He is, yes.
He was jailed for 3 years in '86 for trying to plant a nail bomb, which exploded in his face.
It wasn't a nail bomb.
He served time in '91 for stabbing a Jewish school teacher on an underground.
After he'd been attacked by a communist, he has.
He's got 12 convictions.
Yes, Nelson Mandela was jailed as as the
so
leader of
now,
bombing campaign.
now Tony Lukomba is Nelson Mandela, is he?
No, but I'm saying that Nelson Mandela was jailed as the leader of bombing
So
campaign.
he's seen the light. Tony Lukomba has seen the light,
yes.
has he?
And there's no
so
one,
he's another reformed
yes, he is.
character.
And I'll tell you, there's no
You're
one
also
better.
reformed. You're not recognisable anymore.
Maybe
are you?
so. But I'll tell you, if you're seriously interested in peace, then you should realise this, that there are young white people in some of these areas who are totally alienated from the political process. Now, if some liberal social worker goes in there and says, oh, well, you've got to love these people and so on, they just laugh at them. When Tony Lukomba goes into an area like that and says, look, violence is not the way, there's got to be a peaceful political road, that's the way to get what you want,
So
then they take notice.
You all
So that's
en masse,
better.
all the people who've been convicted of violent offences in your party have en masse gone through a conversion and said, violence is out.
We've certainly got people...
Stephen Richardson, jailed for 3 years for assaulting a black building
but
worker.
if you want to go through this list, it's huge. It's huge. And
It is a huge list,
and
yes.
I'll tell you for
Yes.
why. Because in this country...
We like to have these people in the party. That's
in
what
this
a lot of
country,
people would
owing
say.
to 30 years of appalling liberal education and weakness in the courts, 75%...
You decided to take the law into your own hands.
No, not at all. No,
you
75...
did,
let
obviously.
me finish. 75% of men, by the time they're 25 in this country, have a criminal record of some sort. Therefore, if you recruit young people, you recruit people who in the past have criminal records. If the Tory party still recruited anybody, then they'd have them as well. They don't, because it's a dying party. We recruit young people. We unfortunately get their criminal records.
You wanted strongly motivated fanatics, you wrote in issue number 11 of the Rune. Has that changed as well? You still want fanatics?
That has changed. It's no longer necessary because we're not
So
beaten on every
something
street corner by the far
something
left.
else has changed. Every time you find a policy which is absolutely unacceptable, you change it. Presumably the policies you're advocating now you're going to change in a couple of years' time.
No,
because they won't get you any more votes than you've had.
I'm sure we won't.
No.
We would get more votes, we get plaudits from the BBC if we said, yeah, the multiracial society works, it's lovely. But it doesn't work, it's not lovely for ordinary white people.
Who says it doesn't work?
I'm saying it doesn't work.
Two-thirds of black men have white partners in this country. A third of black women have white partners.
And I think you'll find that Louis Farrakhan thinks that's awful.
That's a well, he's in the minority. You would admit that.
Louis
Farrakhan's views are hardly mainstream,
I think he's still
either
in,
in America or here.
I think he's still in the minority amongst black people. That he's not in the minority amongst many young blacks in London. Many of them look up to that man.
How do you know?
Because I've talked to some of them.
You've talked to some of them.
Yeah.
And then you extrapolate that many hold these views.
I'm sure that many hold their views.
You're sure, but not on the basis of any proper research.
A serious number. There's a very large number of black women who are appalled by the way in which so many black men go with white girls. That's a problem which the multiracial society doesn't address. But the problems of multiracialism now in places like Oldham and Burnley
why is it a
are
problem?
nothing to
It's a
do with black and
multiracial
white.
society working properly, isn't it?
It's a multiracial society working to destroy two totally separate
It's
and
not
unique histories and
destroying
nations.
anything.
And
It's to create a harmonious multiracial society,
it's
which
destroying
the
our
vast
culture, it's destroying
majority
the
of
black
people,
culture.
Mr. Griffith, in this country want.
Whether
you like it or not.
Hindu
they vote
parents,
for parties,
Sikh parents, they're
they
appalled
vote
when their kids adopt Western ways.
Time and time again, people in this country vote for parties that support multiracial harmony in this country. It's a fact of life.
Yes, there's a mismatch between
It's
what
a
people
fact of
really
life.
think
You're too late.
and how they vote.
You're too late. It's happened, isn't it?
No, Britain is about 8% non-white, and if the doors were shut tomorrow, then basically we'd stay a minority white party. We'd stay a majority white country. If the doors aren't shut, and if the Liberals and the Labour Party and the Tories get their way, then the white people of this country are going to be a minority within 60 years. And we've never been asked if we want that. Put it to a referendum, and then see what the public think.
You want to make the world a smaller place. You want to bring in apartheid. You want to have people.
No, not at all.
You don't want understanding. You don't want harmony.
The Liberals are the ones. No, the Liberals are the
Why
ones
do you
who want to make
dismiss
the
people
world.
with labels?
Because
Why does the label make them something else?
It doesn't. But the Liberals are the ones who want to make the world a smaller place and a meaner place.
You rant on about liberals,
No.
just as you rant on about some Jewish
No, I
conspiracies.
don't. I've never talked about Jewish conspiracies at all.
You've talked about how many people. You've broken down the number of Jews who are in senior positions in the media.
And I've never said it's a
haven't you?
conspiracy. Most definitely not.
But why do you bother to do that if you're not saying it's a conspiracy? You don't go. You leave other people to say that, don't you?
No.
You set up
in
the
fact, we
ground.
specifically said it's not a conspiracy. There's very few conspiracies in this country. The only conspiracy is the conspiracy by the liberal left to turn this country into a multiracial state against the wishes of the British people.
You don't really believe that, Mr.
Oh, yes.
Griffin, do you?
Yeah. Again, you don't get your orders. You just all go to the same posh schools. You know what you
And
have
the
to
same
do
posh
to,
universities like Cambridge,
to
which
get
you
your way
went
up the
to as
ladder.
well.
You know how to get your way up the ladder.
And the same posh
you've got a
university
political
that you
ignorance.
went to as Cambridge
yes.
as
Yeah,
well.
I'm lucky I went to a posh university.
Nick Griffin, thanks for being with us.